They played Madison Square Garden. They shared the stage with Black Sabbath. They packed arenas from Toronto to New York, while tens of thousands of fans chanted their name. Then MTV flipped a switch. A producer in Munich replaced their guitars with synthesizers, and one of the most powerful Southern rock bands in America simply vanished. The band that had everything made one fatal mistake and quietly disappeared. This is the rise and fall of Doc Holliday. The story of Doc Holliday didn't begin with a record deal or a management contract. It began in Warner Robins, Georgia in 1971, with a band that called itself Roundhouse and a guitar player named Bruce Brookshire who had something to prove. Brookshire wasn't chasing the same sound as everyone else in the South. While most Georgia bands were trying to replicate the Allman Brothers' laid-back groove or Leonard Skinner's hard-charging boogie, Brookshire went deeper into the roots. He drew his inspiration from Peter Green and Taj Mahal, bluesmen who understood that real guitar playing was about tone, space, and aching emotion. That choice gave Roundhouse a heavier, more melancholic edge that set them apart from their regional peers. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. The environment they operated in was intensely competitive. Macon and Warner Robins were packed with bands, chasing the shadow of Southern rock legends, all of them dreaming of the same lightning that had struck the Allmans. Roundhouse joined that grind, paying their dues one sweaty club at a time. At one point, they even experimented with theatrical makeup, chasing the Alice Cooper image for a short period before abandoning it. It was a telling moment, a band trying on masks before discovering their real face. Through the mid to late 70s, they refined their sound and their reputation on the regional circuit. Night after night, loading their own gear into bars and roadhouses, they developed the kind of tight, powerful chemistry that could only come from years of hard road work. By the late 70s, that chemistry had started attracting serious attention. The turning point came when Bill Kane and Jet Matthews out of Raleigh, North Carolina took notice. They already managed the band Nantucket, and they recognized in Roundhouse a combination of raw talent and commercial potential that was hard to find. The first thing they addressed was the name. Roundhouse was already taken by another act. Keyboardist Eddie Stone solved the problem after the name Doc Holliday came into the conversation, and the band embraced it quickly. It carried the outlaw spirit of the South, a whiskey-soaked defiance that resonated with exactly the audience they were building toward. The name wasn't just a rebranding, it was a declaration of intent. Management wasted no time. By 1980, they had secured Doc Holliday a record deal with a label better known for its pop sensibility, but hungry to capture a piece of the arena rock market that Southern bands were still dominating in the American interior. For Bruce Brookshire and his bandmates, who had spent nearly a decade sleeping in vans and playing for beer money, this was the moment that justified every mile. The label paired the band with producer Tom Allom, a decision that carried enormous implications. Allom was simultaneously becoming one of the most respected names in heavy rock. His work with Judas Priest was already legendary among the people who paid attention to such things. He understood how to take organic, working-class rock and give it the high-fidelity punch that FM radio demanded. He didn't sand away their roughness. He focused it. The debut lineup, Bruce Brookshire on lead guitar and vocals, Rick Skelton on lead guitar, Eddie Stone on keyboards, John Samuelson on bass, and Herman Nixon on drums, entered the studio with years of live performance behind them. That preparation showed in every track. When Doc Holliday was released in early 1981, it entered the Billboard 200 and peaked in the top 30. For a debut Southern rock album in an era when critics were busy declaring the genre dead, that was a genuine statement. I'm a Rocker became a standout track. Their cover of Keep On Running showcased their ability to honor Southern tradition while giving it a contemporary punch. The dual guitar harmonies of Brookshire and Skelton, reminiscent of the Allman Brothers and Thin Lizzy in equal measure, gave the record a texture that felt both familiar and fresh. These were men who had ground it out for a decade on the Georgia club circuit, and suddenly their record was on the charts. The industry had placed its bet on them. For a brief, exhilarating window, the dream felt not just possible, but real. Success demanded a follow-up, and record executives moved quickly. The band returned to the studio to record Doc Holliday Rides Again, their sophomore album. But the process revealed the first friction between the band's instincts and the label's commercial ambitions. Their initial recording sessions in Orlando leaned heavily into what could be called the Macon sound. Soulful, warm, and deeply Southern, featuring a full horn section arranged by Tony Dorsey and background vocals from former Lynyrd Skynyrd singers Mary Holmes and Leslie Hawkins. It was a rich, layered recording. The president of the recording company rejected it outright. He felt the horns and the female vocals softened the band's hard rock image. The entire session was shelved at significant cost. The label brought in a co-producer to work on a second, leaner version. During those second sessions, Brookshire made a pivotal gear decision. He switched from a Gibson Les Paul to a Fender Stratocaster. The difference was immediate. The brighter, more articulate tone cut through the mix in a way that allowed the dual guitar harmonies to fully breathe. The album that emerged became the band's definitive statement. At the center of it was Lonesome Guitar, a multi-part epic that mirrored the emotional journey of every Southern rock fan who ever sat alone with a turntable and a broken heart. It started in quiet reflection and built to a soaring dual guitar climax that announced Doc Holliday had arrived. It was their free bird. It validated everything. The touring that followed Rides Again carried them to the summit. In 1982, Doc Holliday was selected as an opening act on portions of the Black Sabbath Mob Rules Tour, the era of Ronnie James Dio, widely considered Sabbath's second golden age. For a band from Warner Robins, Georgia, the scale was almost incomprehensible.
Lonesome guitar, take me home.
They played major arenas across North America, including large shows in cities like Montreal and Toronto. Bruce Brookshire later described Ronnie James Dio as a gentleman who personally looked out for them on the road. In those rooms, Doc Holliday was not an afterthought. They were a force. The irony was that the money didn't match the glory. Despite playing to tens of thousands of fans every night, the economics of the tour were brutal. The band and crew often shared a single hotel room and lived on rice just to keep moving. The contrast between the roar of the arena and the reality of their bank accounts was a shadow they couldn't outrun. But in 1982, none of that seemed to matter. They were at the top of the world, and the next album was supposed to change everything. By the time Doc Holliday entered the studio to record their third album, the musical landscape had shifted beneath their feet. MTV had launched in 1981 and was already reshaping the entire industry. The second British invasion, Duran Duran, Culture Club, The Human League, had arrived with synthesizers, haircuts, and a visual sophistication that made denim-clad Southern rock guitarists look like relics of another era. Radio programmers were chasing the new sound. Labels were terrified of being left behind. The label put pressure on the band to deliver something that would crack the pop charts and get them onto MTV. Doc Holliday, hungry for the breakout hit that had eluded them, made a decision that would haunt Bruce Brookshire for decades. They agreed to record in Munich, Germany, with producer Reinhold Mack. Mack's resume was impossible to argue with. He had produced Queen's The Game and the Flash Gordon soundtrack, and he had worked with ELO at the height of their commercial power. If anyone could give a Southern rock band a modern sound, it was Mack. What happened in Munich was a transformation, but not the kind anyone had bargained for. Mack brought a much more polished, modern production style to the record. The live feel of the band was softened in favor of a cleaner mix, and the keyboards were pushed forward with a more synth-heavy sound. The dual guitar harmonies that had defined every note of their first two albums were pulled back in favor of a more radio-ready arrangement. Brookshire's vocals remained, but they were surrounded by a sonic landscape that had almost nothing to do with Georgia or the blues or the sweaty roadhouses of their youth.
Into the city of the night.
Brookshire later admitted they thought this was the path to a hit record. New wave and synthesizer-driven pop were taking over the music world. They believed Mack could translate their sound into the language of the new decade. The album that emerged was called Modern Medicine, and it was a profound miscalculation. It wasn't a terrible record, but it wasn't Doc Holliday. The core audience that had followed them since I'm a Rocker heard it as a betrayal. The very qualities that had made them compelling, the rawness, the dual guitar interplay, the honest-to-God Southern grit, had been replaced by something that sounded like it was trying too hard to be something it wasn't, and the pop audience they were chasing never showed up at all. The failure of Modern Medicine was not a single catastrophic moment. It was a sequence of blows, each one landing a little harder than the last. The band invested heavily in a music video for City Nights, filming it on the streets of New York City in 1983. The shoot was plagued from the start. Budget cuts forced the director to shoot on videotape instead of film, a distinction that was immediately visible to the eye, trained on the slick, cinematic look MTV demanded. When the video was submitted to the network, it failed to gain traction. Without that exposure, the album had little chance to break through nationally. Without MTV, the album was invisible. The tour that followed was a slow, demoralizing walk in the opposite direction of everything they had built. The arenas that had shaken with the Mob Rules tour were replaced by clubs. The clubs got smaller, the crowds thinned.
Keep on running. Keep on running.
In 1984, the final blows arrived in quick succession. The record company dropped them. Management followed. The entire infrastructure that had carried them from Warner Robins to major arena stages evaporated in the space of a few months. A notice appeared for a final performance at a club called The Attic in Greenville, North Carolina, just 9 months after the release of the album that was supposed to make them superstars. The personal toll on Bruce Brookshire was devastating. His career had collapsed, his marriage was dissolving, he returned to Georgia and moved back into his mother's house, fighting through a deepening addiction to drugs and alcohol. The man who had stood on the stage at Madison Square Garden and traded licks with Ronnie James Dio was now trying to hold himself together one day at a time. The fall was complete, not with an explosion, not with a scandal, not with some dramatic public reckoning, just a quiet, painful slide into darkness. The story could have ended there. For most bands of their era who disappeared from the American market in the mid-'80s, it did. But something unexpected happened to Doc Holliday, something that says as much about the loyalty of true rock fans as it does about the band itself. In Europe, particularly in Germany, the UK, and Scandinavia, a devoted community of Southern rock loyalists had been quietly paying attention all along. These were fans who had never cared about synthesizers or MTV. They cared about dual lead guitars and honest emotion, and they had been listening to Rides Again on import copies and spreading the word in the way that music used to travel, one listener at a time. In 1986, drummer Jamie Deckard convinced Brookshire, Eddie Stone, and John Samuelson to reform. They signed with a European label and released Danger Zone, an album that cast off every trace of the Modern Medicine experiment and returned completely to their roots. No sequencers, no synthesizers, just 2 guitars and the truth. To the band's genuine surprise, it worked. Danger Zone found an enthusiastic audience in Europe, and Doc Holliday began touring the continent to crowds that received them as returning heroes. A live album, Song for the Outlaw, followed in 1989 and captured the raw energy that had made them dangerous in the first place. Son of the Morning Star arrived in 1993, followed by Legacy in 1996. For 2 decades, while they remained essentially forgotten in the country that produced them, they were a legitimate draw in venues across Germany, Finland, and the UK. It was a strange parallel existence. In America, Doc Holliday was a footnote. In Europe, they were proof that Southern rock's best qualities, honesty, grit, and guitar heroics had never gone out of style. But the most remarkable part of the Doc Holliday story had nothing to do with record sales or European tours. It was what happened to Bruce Brookshire in the years after the collapse. By 1990, Brookshire had worked through the worst of his personal darkness, but he was still searching for solid ground. That year, his mother was diagnosed with cancer. He watched her face that diagnosis with a faith that he had never understood and had never possessed. In her final days, her peace was undeniable. It shook him to his core. After she passed, Brookshire found himself on a path he could never have predicted. Guided in part by personal relationships and the influence of fellow musicians, he began a sincere journey into faith. He got clean. He pursued ordination. He eventually became an Episcopal priest and the founding pastor of Grace Fellowship Church in Warner Robins, the same town where he had formed Roundhouse back in 1971. He described the transition with the directness of someone who had stopped caring about how it sounded. Standing out front as a rock and roll frontman, he said, and standing out front as a pastor were not so different. Both required you to give yourself completely to the people in front of you. Both demanded honesty. Both lived or died on whether you were telling the truth. He didn't walk away from music. He continued to record and tour Europe with Doc Holliday well into the 2000s. But the purpose had changed. The man who had once pushed everything to the limit in pursuit of a hit record now moved through the world with a different kind of intention. The legacy of Doc Holliday is not found in Grammy nominations or platinum records or Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductions. It is found in the memories of the people who were there. If you were at Maple Leaf Gardens in November of 1981 or at Madison Square Garden the following spring, you know what Doc Holliday sounded like, with the house lights down and the volume turned all the way up. If you found Rides Again in a cutout bin in 1985 and played Lonesome Guitar for the first time, not knowing what you were getting into, you remember exactly where you were when that dual guitar climax arrived. That kind of memory doesn't require a platinum record to be real. In the streaming era, their original albums have found a new generation of listeners, younger fans drawn to classic Southern rock, who stumble onto the debut or Rides Again and realize they have been missing something. The music holds up because it was never built on trends. It was built on craft. Doc Holliday's story is ultimately a story about timing. They were a great band in an era that stopped rewarding greatness the way it used to. The machine that elevated them, the FM radio culture, the arena touring circuit, the organic growth of a loyal audience, was being dismantled around them, even as they rode it to its peak. When they tried to adapt, they lost what made them worth following. When they stopped trying to adapt, they found their audience, just not in the country that made them. Some bands burn out. Some blow up in spectacular fashion and give the music press something to write about for decades. Doc Holliday did neither. They simply disappeared. And that haunting, quiet disappearance is exactly why their story deserves to be told. Doc Holliday proved that talent and timing are two different things. They had the sound, the chops, and the live power to stand with anyone in rock and roll. The industry moved, and they disappeared. Not with an explosion, but with a silence that still echoes. What they left behind is a legacy that rewards anyone willing to go looking. Do you remember Doc Holliday? Drop it in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from rock's greatest era.